Yo. What's good? It's your boy Justin Henry here. The Justin Henry Show. Today, we are taking a look at the Green Bay Packers, one of the 32 teams we are going over every single team. If you're here for the first time, do not make it the last time. Make sure you hit the sub button. Drop a like. We need some likes on these team previews. Let me know y'all watching them, all right? So hopefully this is good information for you guys as we go over every single team. But the Green Bay Packers, man, went through some changes after Aaron Rodgers left town. Jordan Love, a lot of question marks about him and his ability to start the season. I think he answered a lot of those questions. So we'll get into this team who has a lot of the same cast coming back in. You know, one really big change at the running back position. But overall, this team looks like they're going to be very similar to what they were last year fantasy-wise, which was very good when it comes to fantasy purposes. All right. At the quarterback position, Jordan Love. Man, Jordan Love had himself a season. There was a lot of question marks about his ability, where he was going to be at. Could he replace Aaron Rodgers and replicate what he was able to do on the football field? Last year, Jordan Love finishes at QB5, threw for over 4,000 yards, 4,159 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. He also had another 250 rushing yards on the ground. So very good season for Jordan Love. And, you know, there were stretches of times last year where I think the fantasy community, especially early in the year, fantasy community, Packer fans especially, were questioning what was Jordan Love? Did he have it? And the one thing that we saw was that he was able to prevail, especially late in the year, and he got rolling in a major way. Took this team on a nice playoff run as well. But he showed that he's going to be the answer to this team's quarterback. You know, what the question that they had, would he be able to replace Aaron Rodgers? Jordan Love proved that he's going to be him. The question for us in fantasy and for 2024 is, how does he evolve? Can he stay? You know, he would do pretty well mistake-wise, only 11 interceptions last year. Can he get under 10 interceptions? Can he play clean football? How does he continue to get better as this team now has higher expectations? I think the floor was really low for the Packers. They stayed in a lot of competitive games, especially later on. But for Jordan Love, we have to see, can he take that next step? Or does he just stay right where he was at with, you know, for us, fantasy-wise, QB5 is incredible. So I think Jordan Love this year has a little bit of room to grow, probably more passing yards. It'll be complemented this year by a slightly improved run game and the health of his receivers. We got to see these receivers stay healthy. So, and his tight end. We need to see these playmakers and pass catchers stay healthy so we can get all what Jordan Love has to offer us at the quarterback position, all right? I think he plays well in the second year as a starter. Maybe a slight increase if you're worried about, like, where do you draft him? I think it's a good draft spot for Jordan Love. The only thing you have to maybe account for is some slight regression, harder schedule. Maybe teams figure him out just because they played well. So I wouldn't expect too much of a drop-off, too much of, like, you know, room to grow. I think he's about where he's at. If it's going to be somewhere in the 4,000 to 4,300 yard passing, I think it's about right. 30 touchdowns seems in the realm of possibilities again this year for Jordan Love. A big piece that the Green Bay Packers brought over, Josh Jacobs. Interesting move, right? Packers had Aaron Jones last year, who's been a mainstay in this offense for the last few years. Brings over a really good player in Josh Jacobs, who played well for the Raiders. He finished RB28 last year in only 13 games, which per game basis, he was doing really well. But he also had 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. Like, it was a kind of a mediocre year, but we've seen Josh Jacobs in the past be a top 10 back pretty consistently when he's played the whole season. And going to a Green Bay Packer team that absolutely needs a mainstay at running back. They need somebody who can handle the touches that they're going to get. Aaron Jones, for all intents and purposes, was kind of banged up during his tenure with the Packers. He played about 13, 14 games a year. They'd miss him 2 to 3 games out the season. So there would come a time where this team actually needs him to stay on the field. And Josh Jacobs, outside of last year, has proven to be pretty durable year in and year out. So I think for Josh Jacobs, this is a really nice landing spot. Get him with an offense that looks really good at times last year and looks like it could be one of the elite offenses in the league. So Josh Jacobs going to Green Bay Packers where it gets cold sometimes in Green Bay. They play in snow game. I don't think that really will bother him a lot. I think Josh Jacobs is set up for a really nice season, a top 10 type season. He might even be a slight discount this year if you're able to get him outside of the top 10. He should fit in there after summer's rolling. ADP should be in the back end of the top 10 running backs. That's where I expect him to be. All right, next up, we got to talk about the backups. Don't want to spend a whole lot of time on A.J. Dillon and MARSHAWN LLOYD. A.J. Dillon re-signed with this team, so I think that kind of says to me that they have at least RB2 intentions for him. But drafting MARSHAWN LLOYD in the 3rd round also lets me know that it's not A.J. Dillon's spot to keep and that this team wants depth in case they have more injuries at the running back position. We saw A.J. Dillon with the starting role at times when Aaron Jones is hurt, and it didn't look like the A.J. Dillon of old, right? You're getting 24 carries for 80 yards, maybe a score. Like, it was a rough go-around sometimes. So he only had 2 touchdowns last year, 600 yards. Like, the seasons before that, he played really well in a complementary role. So I think that there's, that's there, but I'm not going to spend any draft capital on A.J. Dillon. I'm not hoping that he's a handcuff. He belongs on waivers, especially when the team drafted MARSHAWN LLOYD in the 3rd round, 5'9", 205 pounds. So hopefully that he gives him a little bit of juice, can be a decent backup option. I don't think they drafted him to replace what Josh Jacobs is able to provide or take over at any point in time. They drafted him to be a nice, solid backup in case A.J. Dillon doesn't, gets hurt, or in case A.J. Dillon, maybe next year they decide to move and part ways with them. So I think this is more of a depth move as opposed to like potential starter. So if you like MARSHAWN LLOYD, I get it. That's fine. But he's not a player that I would be looking to draft in any capacity unless there was an injury to Josh Jacobs. That's really the only reason why we would have MARSHAWN LLOYD. And in Dynasty, you're waiting out at least 2-3 years. So it doesn't really make sense in my opinion. All right. Now we get to the receiver position, which this team has really good receivers. And if you're part of fantasy, like it's good because you can own any one of them, roster or draft any one of them, but they all pop off at different times. Romeo Doubs seemed to be the most consistent last year, 59 catches, 674 yards with 8 touchdowns. He finishes a wide receiver 4. He was a wide receiver 36. So fringe wide receiver 3 in deeper leagues, wide receiver 4 in your more shallow leagues. That's decent, right? With especially the way that Jordan Love produced. But it's like, it's not something you can really count on. And on a week in, week out basis, he was always good, had maybe 1 or 2 blow-up games throughout the year, but was mostly average. And that's a tough player to play, a guy that can't really win you a week. So Romeo Doubs, to me, probably going to play a similar role. Last year, we had Christian Watson, who was out at times. Luke Musgrave was out at times. And the run game with Aaron Jones out at times, it's like there was more room for him to grow. I just don't see a whole lot more from Romeo Doubs outside of 600, 700 yards, 5 to 7 touchdowns. Like, that's about the range. So am I really interested in drafting him? No. Do I think he's the wide receiver 1 on this team? Absolutely not. It's not Romeo Doubs. Do I think he's a safe wide receiver on this team? Yes. But they're getting one of their guys back, hopefully healthy. He hasn't been able to stay healthy in Christian Watson. And then we saw Jayden Reed really take the reins towards the end of last year. So I like Romeo Doubs. I think he's a safe player. If you can get him outside the top 45 receivers, it's a decent play, but I think you can get more upside later, which is what you'd be playing on any receiver that's not Romeo Doubs. He's the ultimate safe guy, flex. Like, I don't really want any upside. That's what Romeo Doubs is. And then Christian Watson played in 9 games last year, had trouble staying healthy. We talked about that the year before. It's could he stay healthy? And he had issues with that previously. So 400 yards for him last year, 5 touchdowns. Not even great really on a per game basis. Like, he was decent, nothing to write home about. So Christian Watson, man, is a player that if it all sticks to him, for an entire season, I think there's potential there. It's just we ain't seen it. And it's tough, man, because he's a player that obviously I was, for those watching and to know my content, I was one of the guys that was really early on Christian Watson and his ability to make plays. I called out one of the game against Dallas. We saw that what the potential was with him, with Aaron Rodgers. I want to see Christian Watson be able to get through an entire season. And I still don't think that he's the number 1 receiver on this team, which says enough. So I think he'll be an inconsistent flex option at best. I'd probably stay away from Christian Watson unless you got him at a really good price and you had enough starting pieces that you just wanted some decent upside chill on your bench. To me, the number 1 receiver is Jayden Reed, and I think that we can clearly say that after the year he had last year. He finished as the 25th best receiver, wide receiver 25, 793 yards and 8 touchdowns, including some stuff on the ground too. Like, we saw Jayden Reed be utilized pretty much in that Christian Watson role. Both of them were second-round picks, and I think Jayden Reed, it was clear to me that was the target for Jordan Love. He had 64 catches. And so even in a season where Romeo Doubs at time looked like the possession receiver, it was Jayden Reed who was getting a lot of work, even in the second half of the year. So I think Jayden Reed has a very nice future here with the Packers, and I think he has a very good season this year. And he finished wide receiver 25 last season. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that he improves on that he becomes a 1,000-yard receiver, flirts with the 7 to 10 touchdown range. I think that's kind of the route for Jayden Reed. And to me, he seems like he might be a value this year. If we can get him outside the top 35 receivers, which my guess is he's going to be outside the top 30 for sure. If we can get him outside the top 30 to 35 receivers, I see a really nice lane for Jayden Reed to be on fantasy teams. I'll be talking about him as a sleeper moving forward. And then DONTAVION WICKS really stepped up in the second half of last season. Once the team had a couple injuries, Christian Watson went out. They needed him as a third receiver. He finished wide receiver 58 on the year, but his per game numbers were way better in the games where he was starting and getting work. I still think this is a deeper league play. This isn't somebody who I want to consistently count on for fantasy purposes and redraft, unless we get to a point in the middle of the season where we need to pick up a guy like DONTAVION WICKS. So we saw the 4 receivers last year, and to me, it was very clear. The hierarchy was Jayden Reed, then Romeo Doubs, then Christian Watson, then DONTAVION WICKS. WICKS was obviously the last one, right? I think you could interchange. If you want upside, you go Christian Watson. If you want floor, you go Romeo Doubs. But I think Doubs is the safer of the two, and I would have him ranked over Christian Watson. So if I was going Packers receivers as of today, the way I would rank them, number 1, Jayden Reed. I think he stays there the entire year. I would go number 2, Romeo Doubs. Number 3, Christian Watson, later in your drafts for upside. DONTAVION WICKS is a free agent waiver wire pick. I don't really see a whole lot of value with him. A player I do think can be better in this year, Luke Musgrave, who played in 11 games before he got hurt. And, you know, he didn't have a whole lot of yardage, but there was some good performances out of Luke Musgrave. And I expect him as a rookie, he played well. And as a second-year tight end, I expect him to be better this year. He's one of the faster tight ends in the league, and Jordan Love looks his way downfield a lot, not just like short yardage stuff. He was involved in some chunk plays last year. And I think once his team is fully healthy, Luke Musgrave's a player that if you get him as a tight end too, there's some mega upside with him. I don't know if he'll ever be the possession guy, but you want to talk about potential for yardage or being another downfield threat, potentially being used in the red zone. I think Luke Musgrave fits the bill. So, yes, he had an injury plague year last year. Yes, we didn't get to see it all the way filled. But I like Luke Musgrave this year as a dart throw at tight end in deeper tight end leagues. If you start 2 tight ends, maybe you're in a 16-team league and you're looking for upside, or maybe you want a backup tight end, you actually draft a backup tight end. Luke Musgrave has a little bit of appeal to me, all right? So I like this Green Bay Packer team. It reminds me a lot of last year, Jordan Love, Aaron Jones, the receivers, and then Luke Musgrave last year too. So a lot of the same framework as last year's team. It just feels to me that the receivers maybe get a slight bump up. Josh Jacobs, I think he'll be a little bit better than Aaron Jones was for fantasy purposes. And then that backup RB2, is it A.J. Dillon or is it MARSHAWN LLOYD once the year gets going? I think A.J. Dillon has the role for now, and Lloyd will work himself in. All right? So Packer fans, if you were expecting more, hopefully that's a good enough answer for you. Fantasy fans, I hope that was a good enough episode for y'all. Let me know how y'all feel about the content in general in the comments, and then any thoughts on any other Packer players that you may have. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.